Hey guys, this is Luke Moyle, and today I'll be talking about how I 3D modeled my base and how I also rigged my character and got it ready for posing and such. So we'll start off. We start off here actually on the Mixamo website. So if you just look up, www.mixamo.com, you should come up to an Adobe website which allows you to sign in, and once you do, you can actually upload the character that you've made. And once it's uploaded, it takes a little bit. I've got this sped up here, of course. And once it's uploaded, you can place these little pivot points. Come on, hurry up and process. Whatever, skip forward. So, here's our character. Oop, a little bit quick, but as you can see here, there's a number of words here. Chin, you would move. So wrists, you would move the dots here. It is symmetrical. So you can once you move a circle, you drag and click. We'll see. Let me see if I can go back a little bit so we can see it actually do it. Yep. So as you can see, you can drag and drop the points onto the body, and once it's drag and dropped, it will auto rig the character. Which rigging is when it puts all the little bones and joints inside the character. And it will also do the skin weighting for you, but the only problem I have with Mixamo is the skin weighting. A lot of the time for me it's a little bit inaccurate, and things like the upper arm will have an effect on something like the side of the chest, where like your lateral muscles are. As you can see here in this video, this piece here is sticking out because for some reason this part of the arm is controlling it. So as this arm rotates outwards, it pulls this with it. This is something you can fix and change with minor editing inside of Maya, which I do show a little bit later. But once your character is uploaded with this rigging, you can apply any of these Mixamo animations, but I just use this T-pose one because this is the easiest one for me to edit, and it gives me the simplest sort of pose to start with. And once that's done, you can download it, and you should be able to just drag and drop it essentially straight into Maya, or Blender, or whichever one you're using. But as you can see here, I have started the skin weighting. So to get to this section, you need to select the body. Then you need to click on this drop down box up here and select rigging, and then you go to skin. You click on there, and then in this drop down there should be a spot that says skin weights. And next to the skin weights button, there should be a little square. You click on that square and it brings up the settings here, and it will show you each of the bones that are associated with that mesh. So here I have the left arm selected, and as you can see, for some reason the left arm is affecting this whole section of body. So I come down here and I hit replace, and then you can change the value. So value 0 is going to paint it black, which means that bone will have no effect on the section that you're painting. If you set the value to 100 or 1%, I think it is, so it'll look like that. You just drag this all up and it'll be a 1 here. You'll paint complete white, which will give that bone complete control over that section, which we do not want here on the side of the body. And yeah, you can see me sort of painting stuff in here and changing the bone, the skin weights of the bones, and painting in and smoothing. And it looks like it took a long time, but it was only probably only like an hour or two. Which isn't really that long in the the process of the whole project. After I finished skin weighting and I had everything set up the way I wanted it to, it was time to pose stuff. So you do need, if you want to move like the leg with this, there is no controllers, unfortunately. Mixamo does not include controllers for you to play with the animated character. You need to move each individual bone, which is a bit tedious, but it didn't really bother me in this sense because I was only doing it just to pose the character. It's not going to be used for, animating or anything like that. But you can see here, I'm just moving the body around a little bit and fixing some of the skin weights, which I think honestly was a little bit too time wasting. I probably didn't need to do this, looking back on it. But once I have him set up right, I start selecting particular bones, and moving things around to try and get him to be sort of standing in the pose that I have in mind. After I get him in the pose that I have in mind, I begin working on the base. It was a little bit of an afterthought. Of course, I love characters, so I didn't think of the base. I mean, I had ideas of what I wanted it to be, and that shows all the way back in my the storyboards I had made for this character. But I hadn't really thought of the specifics. So I started off with this grey box, which is literally just a bunch of cylinders. This base here is literally just a cylinder that I had squished all the way down, grabbed the top set of rings like this line here, and I just scaled smaller to get this smooth base looking thing. This is just a bunch of untextured cylinders that I do later on texture to look like logs. And this thing here is literally just a big cylinder as well that I add a bunch of lines to, and I rotate it, and then I grab, if I go back, yeah, so I've grabbed every second line on that. Can I show the mesh? Where's the mesh? Where's the mesh? Come on. Yeah, we've seen this bit already. Where's the mesh? There we go. So I make this smaller, and then I select every second edge that goes up, and then I just scale them inwards to give that sort of bumpy look. And then when you smooth it, that's how you get that look of a swirl sort of. And I do decide later on that big swirl is a bit too obstructive of the model. It looks a little bit too it's too big and blocky. It doesn't really add depth to the character, to the scene, which I didn't really like. So as you can see, I sped this up because I did go through the Mixamo rigging and everything quite a few times to get it right. This one here is right after I selected that T-pose option. My first model I used I actually used a different animation and just went from there, but it made it difficult to move things out and see the errors in the skin weighting. So once I selected that T-pose one, it was much easier to see the issues and fix them up. But yeah, I again do the skin weighting, set him up in the pose that I want. And then one of the issues is that when it's a Mixamo thing, it's sort of set up as an animation, so there's a bunch of keyframes. So if you accidentally touch the keyframe animation thing, it will actually remove all the editing you've done. So what you need to do is, after you've copied the character in here and you've modeled it the way you need it to, you actually just select the mesh and just duplicate it, and it will duplicate the mesh out in the pose that you like, and it will just be frozen like that forever. You don't have to worry about accidentally deleting it or anything. After re-adding back in this cape, the easiest way I found to get it up to here, I was thinking about rigging it, but I figured that sort of felt like it was going to take too long. So I decided to just subdivide it to make it a bit nicer to look at, and then just I just soft selected it up there. So I just selected the faces, and soft selection. I showed in my very first video the first video of this little series was that gradient from yellow to black, and it just moves everything around a bit more nice and smoothly. I did end up adding these two other characters that were stuck in the flames, sort of trying to escape whatever demise they had coming for them. And I used the same thing. I just chucked in the Mixamo, made the basic rig, and that made it a lot easier to move them around. So skipping through a bit more of this stuff, I was just I made these are just more of the little cylinders that I sharpened the ends of and soft selected them into being these sort of curled in shapes. I did the same thing for these ropes that were hanging off because I thought it sort of added to the way the whole scene sort of rotates around the left. And yeah, once I sort of had this all set up the way that I wanted to, as I said, I did end up removing that large pillar in the middle in favor of a bunch of smaller pillars, which you'll see later. But after I got all the characters and everything set up the way that I needed to, I started to think more about how I was going to cut the character up to be 3D printable, because I didn't want to 3D print the character as one big solid piece. I could, because he's quite small, but for smaller printers, he just needs to be cut up, so it's easier to print all the pieces. And also, if you have an error or something, like, or a print just fails, you don't lose the material for all the pieces. Maybe, you know, the torso and the head succeed, but the legs fail or something. And but if the legs, you know, if something failed on the whole body, then you'd have to be throwing out the whole body instead of the pieces. So I like to think of it that it's also saving a little bit of material. So I played around with a bunch of different programs. I tried to use Lychee Slicer, but it just wasn't precise enough with the cutting, and I couldn't merge like little pieces back off that I wanted to. Because I didn't want to slice off the back of his head or anything, and it cut up all the pieces into their unmerged forms, which I didn't want it to do. I wanted it to stay all stuck together. So I ended up going through this, Lychee Slicer, Prusa Slicer. I went 3D Builder. I went through a good couple of them, but I ended up landing on Orca Slicer as well, actually. But I ended up landing on Mesh Mixer, which is a pretty old program, but I like the way that it cuts up a little bit more. It's a bit finicky to play with, but it did make, you know, things a little bit easier when I like, for instance, if I cut straight across here, this whole model, it's also going to cut off the wrist and like the cloak at this part, which is not ideal, obviously, because I want those pieces to be one. So I can tell it to keep all those pieces, and then it will then I can tell it to separate all of the shells, and it will have all those pieces separated. But then I can like select the torso and that bit that came off the arm and the sword and everything, and I can tell it to remerge these pieces, and then I'll just have like the legs separated. And then I continue doing that until I end up essentially having all the pieces cut up the way I want. So if we go into, at the end when I finish slicing these things up. Alright, so once I finished cutting everything up, I did move on to the 3D printing and supporting aspects of the project. So as you can see, after I put the different pieces in, we did end up with the torso, shoulders, head, with the legs, arm, and the other arm is connected to the large cloak. So we're going to rotate around to the bottom here, and as you can see, this is how I generally support my things. The large flat surface facing down, and if there's any overhanging things like this waistcloth, I try to make them face up as well. So you just don't have to support them. It just keeps everything a lot cleaner. So then I would go and add supports all the way around the outsides, as you can see. Drag all the way around the bottom of this, and then I usually just throw them in sort of almost at random a little bit on some of the under facing areas as well. Don't worry, it looks like a lot, but it will be parented later. I will show you that as well. So yeah, same thing. It just follows the same idea of just circling around the whole thing and then adding a couple of extra supports on the yellow parts, which are the overhanging areas. So yeah, I do follow that same, even on this long piece, all around here, on these flat pieces, even though it's not, even though these flat pieces aren't overhangs, they're still actually, they're just nice areas to put supports on because it's not going to affect surface quality of the model. Then once you go into manual and parent, it will actually parent all of the extra ones that are next to each other. You can see it looks a lot less dense around these pieces. And then once they've been parented, you hit bracings, and it will actually add the little yellow pieces in between, the little pieces in between, which just sort of, it really just makes it a lot more supported, like a lot sturdier, the supports. Some people don't use them to save on material, but I like to use them just because it makes my supports a little bit more sturdy. After cutting the base in half, it is much larger, but it follows pretty much the exact same idea that I had with the body pieces, except this time I used hollowing. So I hollowed the model out, and then I added in some big holes at the bottom just so that it doesn't fill with resin, because if the insides are filled with resin and it's hollowed, one day that resin will eventually eat away at the insides of the model and crack open and just ruin the statue. And I really couldn't imagine doing that to my beautiful statue that I've printed and painted like 3 years ago, and all of a sudden it falls apart and leaks stinky resin all over my shelf or something. And yeah, the same thing. I just add supports all around the bottom and on all the overhangs, and I parent and brace them. And once that's and I do the same to the other half. I start adding in a couple of models here for a different model, but that I did not make. But and here we can see actually how the once you're ready to slice and send the model off to the printer, we can actually see here how it looks, how it generates every single layer. So it's going to generate it's actually going to generate a layer every 0.03 mils, I think this is. So this printer that this is going on has a resolution of 30 microns, sorry. And that means it is an 8K printer, and yeah, it's going to print roughly, well, yeah, let's see, 4,837 layers, and that's what's going to make up an 8K resolution print. I'm not a huge nerd about it. I don't know. I don't know everything exactly, but yeah, this takes a lot longer than you'd like, so we'll just skip through it so you guys don't have to pay attention to that. No, the slicing part is the most boring bit, and I do the same for the other half of the base. Yeah, then I chuck it on a USB and I take it out to the printer and press play. There are lots of things you will need to figure out for your own printer if you're fresh. You will need to do resin calibrations to make sure that your resin is being cured for the correct amount of time, as well as there is a really helpful video that I'll link everything that I can think of down in the description that allows you. This video shows you how to change the thickness of your supports, because the default supports are very strong and very thick, so they use a lot more material than they need to. So I've changed everything to be a bit smaller, and I still print perfectly fine, and it just uses a little bit less material, because it all adds up in the end. The next video I take will hopefully be about the finished product. I will hopefully have a fully 3D printed and painted and ready to display statue, and hopefully I'll have some more thoughts on how I do have thoughts on it. I'll let all my thoughts out about the whole project and what I think about what I might do with everything going forward then. Thank you for listening to my blabbering. I hope you got to see something cool that I made, at least, if it wasn't informative. And yeah, I hope you have a great day. Bye bye.